All right, welcome in to Carps Corner, Bobby Carpenter Show. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate all the support. Please continue to like, subscribe, and share. This and always make comments too, because I love reading the comments and try to address them. We do a full mailbag at the end of the week, but also like to dive into stuff here when I see some things that are brought up. Questions for you. I mean, folks, I enjoy doing this. Way to connect, and then also ultimately get some of your questions answered as well. So we have the mailbag. I'll throw some questions out on Twitter, throw some of your comments in here as well, to make sure we get them out. But we got a big show today, a lot of stuff to get to. Pretty excited about it, and start, I guess, in a very positive place. There's a lot of good things to talk about. Obviously, there's always some things that need to get done, but we'll start in a very positive place, right off Jump Street. And we're going to throw this up here to begin with. And really excited about this. You see my guy right there, James Laurinitis. Going to be coming home and going to be GAing on the Ohio State defensive staff. Basically going to be running the linebacker room. And that's basically what he did up at Notre Dame. I know James has a passion for the game. He's really smart. He studies and he's a great communicator. And also, by the way, he's also one of the most egoless guys you're going to find. And so when you combine those character traits together, that's what makes him a really good football coach. And got a chance to play with him in college, play with him in off season in the NFL. We got to work through some things. Heck, we lived together. My wife and I stayed with him with our son. Like I consider James a very good friend. I'm really excited that he's going to be coming back. Number one, I love having friends in the building. Played with both him and Heartline now, so that's fantastic. But I just know the quality of coach that he is. I know the quality of person, the quality of man that he is. And so with all of those things, I think he's going to be a great addition. And so he's going to be filling in. Coy McFarland was the GA there, basically running the linebacker room. And we'll get into all the dynamics of that in a minute. But basically running the linebacker room, he leaves, goes to Tulsa with Kevin Wilson. And, he's worthy of having his own room there now. But with that, Jim Knowles, for those may not know, he was the defensive coordinator, but he also was the linebacker coach. And so when you have to wear that big hat and have a lot of stuff going on, and especially now because he's going to want to make sure he gets everything locked up and in a big way this offseason, you want to make sure that you have someone running that room who's very adept. And so James will fill in there for Coy McFarland, and I know he's going to do a great job connecting and teaching the guys, putting finishing touches on players like Steel Chambers, Tommy Eichenberg, Cody Simon, guys who have played a lot, then also helping to develop some of the younger players as well. And I know a lot of people have talked, when is CJ Hicks going to get on the field? Is Gabe Powers going to get on the field? Some of these guys, like he will be able to help coach them with the idiosyncrasies of the game, read character. Guys who have been good and are talented players, but coming in here, like get them over the edge a little bit. Because here's the one thing I know about James. James was not the most physically gifted guy in the world. James got to play at a high level because he maximized his ability through working in the weight room, relentless film study, and his knowledge of the defense. And so when you have all of those things in unison, you're going to be able to have success. So being able to talk guys through processes of how to do this and when to do that and making sure they fully understand it. And he's really he's a great listener. And I mentioned him being egoless. And this is what's great. If he gets called by his best friend, Marcus Freeman, without diving into their relationship, I'd say I know James fairly well. I know a couple of guys who he's very close with. And I would say Marcus is one of his best friends you're going to find. So you get called by this guy to say, hey, it's my first head coaching job. I need you up here because I know what you're about. I know the culture you help create. And I know how good of a communicator you are. Not to mention, we'll get to the recruiting element of it in a little bit, but how big that is. And so he goes and does that for a year, uproots his family, goes to South Bend. I think there was always a part of James that probably wanted to coach at Ohio State. It's his alma mater. And, whether, Ryan Day just getting here at the end of Urban's tenure, in the last couple of years, James is working in the media. I think there was always that yearning, that desire to get back to it. And, for a lot of different reasons, sometimes things, they just don't work out. And, you have to make sure, and it's tough. A lot of former players always say they want to coach. And you'll hear a lot of guys on Twitter say, I want to do this. I'm going to do that. I want to be a part of it. They really don't. I've been over there as much as any non-paid personnel at the Woody Hayes. And probably more so the last 20 years, I joke, I've logged probably more Woody Hayes hours outside of two guys so I know have been there throughout, and they're not even on the coaching staff because coaches have come and gone. And I'd always come back every offseason, but I'm in there all the time. But I'm not a coach, and I don't go and spend 70 hours a week in the building. And so there's the elements that come and go. So to get former players who say they want to do it, but are actually serious about it and are willing to sacrifice, because it's not, coaching isn't just an individual decision. When you have a family, it's a family decision because it's a lifestyle adjustment. It's a change. James has 3 young daughters. He's got a wonderful wife in Shelly. Like, they've been together since college. And when you decide to get into this, you understand everything that comes with it, the emotional highs and lows. And James is pretty mellow with that, but just riding through the waves of losses, and your family feels it too. And understanding that Ohio State is the biggest thing going in Columbus, Ohio. And that's going to be, it's going to be preeminent when you guys go out, and it's going to be something that people bring up and talk about. And that's going to be a lot of your life. And whether or not your wife wants to talk about it, people are going to come up and talk to them. And should they or not, that's outside of it. Then, eventually you hopefully have success, you get opportunities to move on, different things happen. And so it's a family decision. And so for him to get back into it and come back here is very exciting for me, because number one, it's a guy who I really trust a lot, and his ability to help educate these guys, but knowing what he's about, how he's going to operate, what he's going to do for this program. And then the recruiting element, not just for current players. We talk a lot about Brian Hartline, and James and Hart have a lot of similarities. There's some personality differences, as everybody's going to have, but some of the similarities he has are the things that will make him a great recruiter. Number one, he checks every box off qualifications, All-American, all the awards that he won, national awards, played, 8 years in the NFL, all-time leading tackler for the Rams. Like, he has all of those things in spades. And so there's going to be instant credibility. But then when you talk to him, you realize he's a great listener. And he's going to sit there and he'll talk and try to figure, understand what players need and how he'll be able to help them and nurture them. And those are the things that when you get into it that really matter. And that's what separates guys in recruiting. And so he'll be able to do a lot of great things, obviously, and be able to have a lot of success here. And I'm excited for him to have that opportunity to go through all of this, to be back here, to be a part of the brotherhood. Because when you're an alumnus of a place, I always tell you, when you go recruiting, it's not selling, it's telling. And that's what Heartline gets to do. I can tell you about my experience here. I can tell you what it means to play here. And it's not something that I have to manufacture. It's not something I see secondhand, or it's a third party. Like, this is me. I experienced it. This is what it ultimately did for my life. And now I'm going to be here coaching you in the same manner that I was coached, and trying to help make sure that you're going to have the best experience possible, and you're going to be able to improve and become the best version of yourself. Because that's ultimately what your coaches are tasked with doing, making you and helping you become the best you can be. And even on days you don't necessarily want to do it, squeezing the blood from the rock a little bit. And so James will help do that, much in the same way Brian Hartline will. So I'm excited for James to begin his journey here at Ohio State and everything that he's a part of. I think it's going to be something that's pretty darn special, but something that's pretty darn sweet. So we're going to go from there. We'll go to some other positive news. We'll throw this up here. And Dwan Jones, huge right tackle for Ohio State, measured in the wingspan of almost 90 inches, 89.5 inches, Senior Bowl. It's a typical wingspan of someone who's 7'5", longest player that has ever been measured in Senior Bowl history. Dwan Jones is massive. And we knew that. He is huge. They call him Big Thanos, but the physical attributes that he has is huge. So I hope he goes well, moves well at the Senior Bowl, does everything he needs to do down there. Because Dwan, I think, is someone that, he's got a lot of draft flexibility as far as where he could go. People are going to fall in love with the attributes. They're going to fall in love with the size. Can you do a good job of moving his feet, not getting head heavy, and then using those long levers and the big base that he ultimately has? It's got to be a knee bender, get his rear end down. But when he does those things, I mean, he's as good as just about anybody. And you saw him play really well, obviously, for Georgia, or against Georgia in the Peach Bowl. So great job there by Dwan. The physical attributes are amazing. And this is one of the things Ohio State's going to have to replace. And so as we kind of meander through the offseason here, we'll get into a lot of this with Justin Fry and replacing guys like Dwan Jones, replacing guys, like Paris Johnson, Luke Whippler, and Paris and Dwan especially, because those guys and their physical attributes are tremendous. They're immense. They're get off the bus first guys because of everything they provide. And so being able to coach them through it and get guys up to speed to be able to have an offensive line that is close to that good will be tough. And they have everything else as far as skill players. It's can you get a quarterback? Can you protect them? And ultimately have success with that. Want to deviate quickly and talk a little bit about Jim Tressel. And oh goodness. So paper up in Northeast Ohio and talking a little bit about Ryan Day. And everybody always wants to know, former coaches, what do you think of the current guy? Jim Tressel's the second most recent coach. Urban Meyer's in the media, so he gives his opinion a lot. But Tress, he's retiring. He's on his way out at Youngstown State. He's a guy that I look to a lot for advice in life and reading lists every year. I want to know what he's been reading because this is one thing that Tress and I think Ryan Day have in common a lot. I think they're good listeners, and listening is paramount to being a great leader because it's impossible to know how to lead people unless you know about them and you know what motivates them, what drives them. People would say what makes them tick. So Ryan Day is a good listener, much in the same sense that Jim Tressel was. And that's why I like Ryan. Every person is going to be different that coaches. You have your own personality, but I feel like there's a lot of Jim Tressel in there. There's some Urban in there. Like there's a blend of a lot of people because that's who he is. And so it's been successful for him, but I enjoy talking to him. But Jim Tressel said this, I'm a Ryan Day fan. He's got something about him. And you see it where he's not somebody that's crazy, gregarious with his personality, with his mannerisms and all these different things. You saw a lot of that passion and emotion, though, kind of bleed out in Georgia because I think they put so much into it in that Peach Bowl that, it was the fire was bound to come out. And if that's who you are, like, go be it. Go be it, man. Get your guys fired up. But he's measured too. He's very measured, and he doesn't, he's not a hothead. He doesn't, scream and yell at his players. Like he's focused. He's targeted with what he does and what he says. But one of the other things that Tress, and I'll paraphrase this, navigating the portal right now and NIL, how difficult all that is. But he feels like Ryan is up for the task and is going to be as good as anybody at ultimately doing it. And it's because of Ryan's consistency. You can see it on a day in and day out basis of what he's able to do and be very steady and not overreact. And it's like Jim Tress says, like, he's not going to go out there and, grab, 19 portal guys. Like, that's not how you build a team. And he knows that's not how you build a team. And so he's going to build it in the best way that he ultimately knows how. But it's always good to get some reassurance rather, from a former coach, especially a guy who's won a national title. And I always say this, that very rarely are people going to be all ultra negative when it comes, to a question. If someone asks me something about someone I'm maybe not all that fond of, but if they're in a position where they deserve respect, you give some mild compliments and you move on. I think Jim Tressel saying some of these things, like it's a little more than just like a passing. Yeah, I think Ryan's doing a good job. Like he without knowing him and being around him on a daily basis, there was some strength to these comments, which leads me to believe that he has confidence. It's not necessarily what they say, it's what they don't say. And so Tress, I thought, was pretty positive on this with kind of how he went about it and some of the things he ultimately said. I want to get into this about Ohio State. Athletic department should be in good shape. It was released, 11 Warriors put it out there. Their revenue and expenses, $250 million in athletic revenue, surpassed the previous high of 233. That's immense. Some of their big expenses, $42 million for coaching, $39 million for support staff. And that's where that's grown, the coaching and the support staff. And that's one thing I will give Gene a lot of credit for, is understanding, like, hey, you want to keep a guy like Brian Hartline, pay him. And James, like, up at Notre Dame, you can bring guys here. And James isn't a monetary thing, Laurinitis, but being able to bring guys in, you've got to be able to pay coaches, pay to keep them, pay to get them, pay to retain them here. And they've done that. And so that coaching number that's going to be pretty big, and the support staff and everything else that goes into it. Yeah, it's also something else that's pretty big with regard to this. So those are the biggest numbers. Ohio State football in and of itself brought in $109 million. That's terrific. And I don't think that encapsulates the $62 million in just pure donations that the athletic department got. I'm willing to probably guess that probably 75% of that was football related. The people were giving with football in mind. Maybe I'm high on that. Maybe it's maybe it's 60%, 70%, maybe it's as high as 80. But $109 plus a good chunk of the 62 million that came in. And so that's going to be a large percentage of the athletic department budget of their revenue on that, probably close to 2/3, maybe 70%. Hoops brought in 25 million in revenue, and wrestling actually, revenue positive, over $1 million. And so it's football, basketball somewhat, and then wrestling a little, but those are the three revenue drivers now. And honestly, profit drivers for Ohio State, with the amount of money that they bring in over and above their expenses. And football has massive expenses, but there's a massive expectation for success there as well. And so that's when those things are ultimately aligned. They need to ultimately happen. Speaking of athletic departments and ultimately dealing with some cash, Brian Kelly, who's the head coach for LSU, I know this came out last week, but through a Louisiana state audit, their state auditor, which they should be credited for figuring this out, found out that LSU paid Brian Kelly an extra $1 million in salary last year. Got by the state auditor, legislature, and I don't think there was any. This wasn't like an office space deal where we're rounding errors on large amounts and trying to slide some money through. They said there were duplicative payments, some paid to him and some paid to his LLC. And this is one thing trying to understand. If you don't understand how coaches get paid, a certain chunk of it's going to come out of the university, and they're going to have their media rights deals, whether it's, in Columbus here is WBNS. They got the coaches shows for TV and for radio and everything else. And so they pay a portion to be able to have that. There's some, Learfield, IMG probably kicking in cash, for this. There might be some of the Nike money, at the different schools, or, the apparel stuff. And so if your coaches are smart, they'll take their salary because they have to probably take that in W-2, but a lot of it, other stuff, they probably have an LLC where it pays through that, and they have expenses and things, can be handled better for tax purposes, especially when you're talking about making $10 million. And so it's a pretty nice deal, but Brian Kelly, they picked that up and got all that remedied. So he's going to be making $1 million less this year than he was supposed to make as they slowly ratchet that down. And maybe they taper it over 2 or 3 years or whatever it might be, but getting that corrected and getting it fixed. And then I'm going to throw this up here. Our guy, Jim Harbaugh, breaking news. This came out, Schefter reported last week. So not all that crazy breaking, but Jim Tressel met with the Denver Broncos owner, Greg Penner, in a meeting. So he flew out there at his first meeting. And then that's when he came out and said, you can't happy. And, was pulling his name out of consideration for any of the NFL jobs. He loves it there at Michigan. He's ready to go. But then we find out that Penner flew to meet with Harbaugh at home. So Harbaugh didn't go anywhere for an interview. Penner flew in, had a second round of follow-up there. And so I think that's worthy. That's of note. It's got to see, because I think if Jim Harbaugh was still offered an NFL job today, I believe that he would take it. And so we can say all these things. And he has said, a smart man told me to never rule anything out in the future. Yeah, I get that. And it's always leaving the door open. And I don't know how confident people feel, or they're up there in Michigan about you returning, and maybe they're happier you're back now than they were a couple of years ago after the last 2 seasons of success. But very interesting paradigm. The fact that we were supposed to be past all this, can't unhappy, happy, out happy. And all of a sudden you're meeting with the Broncos owner. So there we go. We got that. Some other interesting news. Josh Gaddis, who won the Broyles Award in 2021 for Michigan being their OC, came in from Alabama. Apparently he got in a fight with Mike Loxley there. He kind of burned bridges on the way out of Michigan. Goes down working for Mario Cristobal at the U down in Miami. And Interestingly enough, he gets fired after one season. And interesting too, he gets fired before National Signing Day, which is Wednesday. Historically, that would have meant a lot, maybe less now because not many guys are signing at this point. Most of them sign early. And I guess you can get out of your letters of intent is Florida's, show letting out their quarterback. And then you can always transfer after you get there and hop in the portal. So you have that option. But Josh Gad is fired. And there's a lot of different things swirling around, but coach of the year for assistant coaches a couple of years ago at Michigan, one season down there. You think maybe Michigan would bring him back, especially after Matt Weiss, their co-OC, he got in some trouble and he was removed from his position. So you have the opening, but it just doesn't seem like that's something that's going to work out. And that's a shame. Not really. Kind of laugh at it, but Josh Gaddis, there's some rumors and things swirling around down there. I'm going to wait to see what all has apparently happened. But I know Mario Cristobal can be a tough guy to work for and can be a little bumpy. And lastly, we'll finish with this. This is something that's a little serious. My man Jay Book will throw this up. The Bama NIL Center is being built because they're going to have a full-time staff working specifically for NIL, and there's 600 athletes, according to 24/7 Sports. They'll be creating content for fans and players to help connect them. And so as you look at this statement, you'll read it here. Bama is basically partnering with Learfield IMG, who that's Ohio State's partner as well on the media side. They're building a facility, and this came out last week about building this facility for NIL. And do you really need something for bricks and mortar with NIL? I don't think it's essential, but it shows that you value it. And maybe they're going to have meetings, have financial advisors, have all kinds of stuff in there, and have the ability to shoot commercials. I don't know. I have no idea what all the center is going to have, but it's going to probably be a pretty sweet business building where guys can come in and take meetings and feel like they can get that done. So this is where we're at with NIL, and this is why it's a big deal. And anybody who's in denial of that, like you're denying the fact that the sun's going to rise tomorrow. I mean, it's going to come up. NIL is going to be here and it's going to be real. And that's why Tress talked about Ryan Day's ability to navigate it and not complain about it. Alabama's done complaining about it. They're trying to solve it now, trying to be problem solvers. And Nick Saban's always done a good job about that, solving problems. So I don't know if Ohio State necessarily needs something like this, but I do believe they need to start putting together, plan, alumni, boosters, everything, whether it's donating to the collective on a small aggregate from, all the alumni clubs and everybody gives up Starbucks once a week and donates, $5 a week or $5 a month or whatever it might be, with a decent chunk of the alums. And that would take a nice dent out of this every year. NIL stuff that needs to go until maybe they change it and maybe they don't. Who knows? There's going to be a lot of stuff with it, but needs to start getting corrected because you have Alabama and schools doing like that, doing some big things. And then lastly, too, this is going to be weekly PSA and we'll close. I probably should lead with it. Ohio State wants Ohio to have spring ball for high school players. They need to have spring ball. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how it exactly operates, but they do it in all the southern states. Ohio is getting behind, dangerously behind in football. And for a state, with I believe the 6th or 7th largest population, it is beginning to lag behind in the development of its football players. And maybe not every school needs to have it. Smaller schools maybe don't. But the bigger Division I, II schools in some of the bigger areas have it as an option for kids to be able who want to play, who don't play a spring sport. And I'm all about diversifying sports. I played them all growing up, everything outside of baseball, track, everything, swim, whatever it was, hoops, I think it's important. All my kids, they wrestle, they do it all as well. Lacrosse, we didn't have lacrosse, but all this stuff, I think it's good, but we need to have spring ball in Ohio. And there has to be a way. So I'm encouraging everybody, write letters to your principals of your local high school. Tell them you want it. Tell them you need it. They don't necessarily have to have it. We'll figure out the regulations. If it's 2 weeks, 7 practices, that's a start. And that's something. You do it, after the first round of the baseball playoffs, when tracks are in regionals, and half the guys are done playing baseball anyway, and most track athletes are done. And so you do it right there, you figure it out, and you move forward and have 2 weeks right at the end of the school year. You get in some pads, you have coaches the ability to come around and take a look at you, but you're going to develop guys. They're going to be better players ultimately in college quicker. And so they're going to have the ability to get recruited better, and they're going to be just better players due to more reps. So that needs to happen. And I'm going to be on this thing for the next, I don't care how long it takes, 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, there's a pathway. But just continue to let your principals know at your schools and hammer them with it, your principals and ADs. And they'll tell you about the spring sports boogeyman, how it'll kill spring sports. They have in Texas, they have in Georgia, they have in Tennessee, Florida, all these other sports that, by the way, have great spring sports. And I know they have a little better weather and some different things, but there's a way to do it and to do it smart. So thank you for listening. Appreciate tuning into this is Carps Corner. Subscribe, like, share, comment, all the good stuff. So I appreciate it. We'll catch up again soon.